export practices. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you very much, Raki, and thank you, Namrata and the AIOS for inviting me to present. So it is almost midnight here in Melbourne, so I will try my best. I do have a pre-recording for this presentation, but just to give you some context, when we think about exporting tissues, we might just think about international, but it's not just about moving internationally across borders. It's also about moving within your nation or outside of your jurisdiction or your state, if you will. So keep that in mind when you're watching this presentation, and hopefully there'll be some takeaways for you to consider. Now, just let me get this up for a second. It's making me do something funny. Almost there. It should be there now. You can see today I'm providing a snapshot of 3 different studies which collectively support the notion of improving awareness of corneal export practice, and there's no conflict of interest in this presentation. I'm doing this because I want to remove misconceptions in the public, such as you shouldn't be exporting because there's people who need the tissue here, or perhaps that exporting is illegal or black market or automatically associated with profiting. I want to remove that so that we can improve our transparency and remain trust with our donors. First of all, the first project that I did was sector interviews, and we interviewed 92 sector members from around the world and sentiment analysed their response. Huge piece of work, but specifically we asked these particular interviewees what the current donor consent and export practices were, if any at all. And we found that globally, regionally, nationally, and even locally, there was no consistency. And in fact, in most cases, there was no such consent or even informed information being provided to donors about the export process at all. Regardless of current standards, we did ask our participants whether or not donors should be consented or at least informed. Of our 92 participants, 72 provided a response, 56 of which said yes. They did, however, draw the line at directed decision-making because donor-directed decision-making isn't extended to other areas of eye care or donation. Secondly, we conducted a public survey with the Australian public. We surveyed 1,044 participants. Again, a huge study, but specifically for today's presentation, we found that donors did want to know about exporting on the public available websites. They wanted a tick box on the donor registry to indicate that they would be willing to share overseas. They did want to know face-to-face and also at the consent process. They did, however, indicate that they wanted the members of the profession to make decisions about directed donation and wanted to do so both transparently and ethically and in an organised manner. Thirdly, we did a study in 2020 where we reviewed publicly available websites of iBank and Tissue Bank and agencies involved in the movement of tissue internationally. From those that were publicly available on the server at Google, we ended up with 79 publicly available websites from 9 nations. Collectively, we found that only 16 explicitly said that they exported tissue, 17 implied by saying that they were engaged in international activity, but 46, which was majority, didn't even mention it at all. We did find that not one of the websites indicated how they made their decision on exporting, for example, to which country or in which manner, or whether or not they engaged third parties. And finally, there was nothing to indicate that donors were consented for export at all. We found that there was an inadequate amount of information on the sector websites currently to provide the members of the public with sufficient information. So collectively, our recommendations from our studies are that donors should be consented or at least informed that their donation will be moved. There needs to be an improvement of publicly available information, and the sector must work preferably nationally, but also at the local level to be more transparent about their activities. For your reference, since our studies, things have been implemented here in Australia, both at the EBANs and at my local iBank in Melbourne, where we now provide information on our public websites to indicate that we do export. Additionally, also on our local iBank, we also have the information on our consent form as well, both for transplant and research to say it will be moved overseas. I'd like to thank my co-authors and my funding bodies, the NHMRC and the Lions Eye Bank in Perth. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was